Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're venturing into a story many of us think we know the origin of McDonald's.
Right. That iconic global brand.
Exactly. And a lot of our perception probably comes from the movie The Founder.
Yeah, which was, a compelling movie.
Totally. But we've dug into a whole bunch of sources, some fascinating Reddit discussions, correcting the movie, official histories from McDonald's itself, Ray Kroc's own writings, financial breakdowns, critical reviews, the works.
A real mix.
And our mission here, for you listening, is to kind of peel back the layers on this deep dive, go beyond that familiar movie narrative.
Try and separate the facts from the, let's say, compelling fiction.
And really get a handle on the complexities of how McDonald's was actually taken over. It's a huge moment in business history. We want to do it quickly but thoroughly, looking at it from all sides.
Yeah, because the popular story, it often paints Ray Kroc as this, almost purely villainous figure who just steamrolled the nice, naive McDonald brothers.
Right, the simple version.
But when you look at all these sources together, it gets murkier, more complex. You see ambition, sure, but also the financial realities, different ideas about the future.
It's not just what happened, but why. And maybe what that tells us about business, about growth, about, everything involved in building something massive.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start unpacking it. That Reddit thread we looked at was pretty interesting, right? People were pointing out specific inaccuracies.
Yeah, definitely. And it did acknowledge, the movie gets some early stuff broadly correct.
Like the fact that the McDonald brothers were already franchising a bit in California.
Right. And that Kroc initially focused his own efforts, his expansion plans more towards the Midwest. That part seems to line up.
Okay, so there's a starting point of truth.
For sure. The movie uses that as a base, but where it really starts to diverge from, the documented history is around the details of how Kroc actually bought the company.
The buyout itself.
Yeah. And even that early franchising, the movie maybe makes it seem a bit bigger than it was. The brothers' efforts were more, regional, which matters when you think about the opportunity Kroc saw.
Okay. But the biggest shift is the money stuff, the financials of the sale.
That seems to be the major point of contention, and it gets really interesting here.
Let's talk about that 0.5% royalty, that handshake deal.
Yeah.
It's like the core betrayal moment in the film.
It really is. But our sources, they consistently suggest that specific percentage wasn't actually in the final written sale agreement for the company itself.
Really? So it wasn't part of the official deal?
It seems more likely it might have been perhaps a separate verbal pledge Kroc made about his future restaurants, the ones he owned, and specifically those outside California, not part of the main company's sale contract.
Wow, okay. That's a huge difference.
It is. And then there's the actual purchase price. The movie kind of leaves you feeling the brothers got totally ripped off.
Yeah, definitely leaves that impression.
But the numbers we're seeing across different sources, it was $1.7 million per brother. So $3.4 million total.
Okay.
And crucially, it seems like that number was chosen specifically so they'd each walk away with $1 million after taxes.
$1 million clear back then.
Exactly. And that Reddit discussion, someone did the math factoring in inflation. That's like almost $10 million each in today's money.
So not exactly chump change. They weren't left destitute.
Far from it. It was a substantial sum for the time.
And here's another angle the movie sort of smooths over. Kroc himself, he wasn't some mega-rich CEO just writing checks, was he?
Not at all. That's a key point from the Reddit source, too. He was still building the franchise system. He didn't have $3.4 million sitting in the banks.
How did he manage it?
He had to borrow, heavily. Took on significant debt to make the purchase happen. Reports suggest the whole thing, with interest, ended up costing him closer to $10 million.
Okay, that paints a very different picture. Less of an easy takeover, more of a huge financial gamble on his part.
Absolutely. And that financial pressure, you have to imagine that fueled his drive, his relentlessness in expanding the brand. He needed it to pay off.
It wasn't just pure ambition then. Maybe survival too. Or at least ensuring his massive investment worked out.
Could be a big part of it. And it also maybe sheds some light on that whole handshake agreement thing again. The brothers' feelings about it later.
Yeah, back to the handshake. The movie hinges on it being this concrete promise he broke.
Right. But again, the sources are pretty clear. Whatever was said, it wasn't in writing. Legally, that makes it, hearsay, unenforceable.
So why the bitterness from the brothers then, if it wasn't a formal broken contract?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the billion-dollar question, given how things turned out.
Yeah.
One strong possibility coming through in those Reddit talks and reviews is that they They completely underestimated how big McDonald's would become.
They couldn't see the future global scale.
Probably not. They might have pictured, a successful regional chain, maybe a bit bigger, but global domination. And what 0.5% of that would eventually be worth, it's astronomical.
So the bitterness wasn't necessarily about a specific broken promise on that day, but maybe regret seeing what they missed out on later.
That seems very plausible. A miscalculation of the sheer potential, rather than just a clear-cut breach of a written deal they thought they had.
Okay, now, the movie did seem to get the brothers' ambitions right, in a way. They weren't looking to build a massive empire themselves.
No, that part seems accurate. Sources suggest they were pretty happy with the success they already had.
Their original place was doing well, right?
Very well. And they were getting that initial percentage from Kroc's early franchises, so they were financially comfortable. They seemed to be aiming more for, a comfortable passive income.
Just keep things steady?
Pretty much. And interestingly, those Reddit comments point out they'd actually been semi-retired for a couple of years before the sale.
Oh, really? Not like the movie shows them, still flipping burgers and running the place day to day.
Apparently not. Which, again, changes the picture a little.
But Kroc did need their approval for things, right? The movie showed him getting frustrated by that.
Yeah, that seems true. Based on their initial agreement, he was technically their agent, and they held the reins on certain changes. Though, that whole storyline about the powdered milkshakes, seems that was made up for the movie. Dramatic license.
Ah, okay. So the need for approval was real, but the specific conflict over milkshakes wasn't.
Right, but you can see the dynamic. Kroc wanting to move fast, innovate, expand.
And the brothers, maybe more cautious, slower, wanting to protect what they'd built.
Exactly. And their passive style, their reluctance sometimes, clearly created friction. Kroc needed them to sign off, but they weren't always on the same page or moving at his speed.
That scene in the movie where Kroc basically throws down a blank check.
Yeah.
Was that based on anything?
According to those Reddit sources, yeah, something like that did happen. Kroc was getting desperate to buy them out, to get full control.
And the relationship soured during those negotiations.
It seems so. He felt their demands kept getting higher, more difficult.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit to Kroc's character. The movie portrays him, well, pretty harshly by the end. Shrewd, maybe ruthless.
Definitely shrewd. Cunning. Our sources generally back that up. He was a tough businessman. But maybe not the pure, almost cartoonish villain the movie sometimes leans into.
But some of his actions after the sale, they don't look great.
No, they really don't. That story about him deliberately opening a McDonald's right across the street from the brothers' original restaurant, San Bernardino, that's well documented. And it basically drove their original place out of business because they couldn't call it McDonald's anymore. That feels petty, vindictive even.
Wow. And didn't he also refuse to call them the founders?
Yeah, he consistently downplayed their role, wouldn't really acknowledge them as the originators later on. Another layer to his complex personality.
So that Reddit comment about the movie oversimplifying things, Kroc as the villain, the brothers as these naive country bumpkins, that feels about right.
I think so. Based on everything we've read, the brothers weren't naive. They built something innovative, successful, and their contract initially actually put Kroc in a tough spot sometimes. They had leverage.
It wasn't a simple case of him just tricking them easily.
Doesn't seem like it. Which leads us to Kroc's actual business philosophy. It wasn't just about being ruthless. There was more to it.
Okay, like what principles did he operate by? We saw stuff from Buffett, Kroc's own writings.
Right. Several key things pop out. His early motto was, "Kiss, keep it simple, stupid." That focus on efficiency, standardization.
The core of the McDonald's system.
Absolutely. But maybe even more important was his understanding that the franchisor only succeeds if the franchisee succeeds. It's a partnership.
A symbiotic relationship.
Exactly. He knew that if the operators running the stores were profitable and successful, the whole system would thrive. Warren Buffett actually commented on this principle too.
Oh, yeah. What did Buffett say?
He noted how a strong franchise system empowers the person running the local business, lets them build real value. And Buffett famously regretted selling his McDonald's stock way too early, called it a billion-dollar mistake.
Wow. That's quite an endorsement of the system Kroc built.
It really is. And Kroc was apparently very hands-on, obsessed with details. He had that look sharp and act sharp motto, demanding professionalism.
High standards.
Definitely. And he was a big risk taker, obviously, betting big on this whole thing. But interestingly, it wasn't always about some grand master plan from day one.
No.
It seems more like a part-to-whole approach. Focus on getting one piece right, then the next. Remember, his initial goal was just to sell more of his multi-mixer milkshake machines.
Right. It started small and just snowballed.
And he was laser-focused on the customer. Quality, service, cleanliness, and value QSCMV. That was everything.
The pillars of the brand.
Yeah. And he looked after his franchisees, too. Sources say he refused kickbacks from suppliers to make sure the operators got the best possible prices on ingredients and supplies.
Building trust there.
He really believed in win-win relationships with suppliers and franchisees, valued transparency, direct talk. He also made smart moves like investing in real estate during tough economic times.
Owning the land under the restaurants.
Became a huge part of the business model later. He also believed in letting local managers have authority since they knew their markets best.
Decentralizing power.
Right. And sticking to the core business, no distractions like payphones or jukeboxes. Keep it focused.
But he encouraged new ideas.
Yeah.
Like menu items.
Absolutely. He knew good ideas could come from the operators on the ground. And his methods for finding new locations were pretty hands-on too, not just looking at maps, but flying over areas, talking to local people, getting a feel for the community.
Really boots on the ground.
Yeah. He also seemed to understand that success can breed complacency. He had a saying, "Nothing recedes like success, always pushing forward."
Never resting on laurels.
Exactly. Embracing change, seeing competition as something that makes you better, just focus on delivering that QSCNV. Oh, and Charlie Munger had an interesting take too.
Warren Buffett's partner, what did he say?
He saw McDonald's as this incredible machine for teaching responsibility, work ethic, especially to young people starting their first jobs. An effective educator, he called it.
That's a fascinating perspective. Okay, let's quickly rewind to the brothers again. Their initial success, it started in California, right?
Yeah, they moved there, tried the movie business first, that didn't work out. Then they hit on the drive-in restaurant idea.
And the big change was in 1948.
That was pivotal. They totally revamped their operation, simplified the menu, focused on the speedy service system, introduced the 15-cent hamburger. It was revolutionary for its time.
And we mentioned they did start franchising before Kroc.
Yes, McDonald's own history confirms that. They had about 9 franchisees operating before Kroc came along in '54, and they developed that iconic look, the red-white building, the golden arches.
Which Kroc instantly saw the power of, presumably.
You'd have to think so. It was brilliant branding.
So Kroc's background, he was selling paper cups and then those multi-mixers.
That's right. He was the exclusive distributor for the multi-mixer, and that's what led him to the McDonald brothers in 1954. They were buying an unusual number of his machines.
Because their single restaurant was so busy.
Exactly. He went out to see why, saw their incredibly efficient system, and immediately grasped the franchising potential on a massive scale. Way beyond what the brothers envisioned.
So he became their franchising agent.
Initially, yes. He opened his first McDonald's in Des Plaines, Illinois in 1955. And then, as we discussed, he bought the entire company from the brothers in 1961 for that $2.7 million figure, though the total paid was $3.4 million.
Okay, there might be a slight discrepancy in figures there. 2.7 Bs, $3.4 million, maybe 2.7s were the initial agreed price before tax considerations.
That could be it. Or just different sources reporting slightly differently. The key takeaway is it was a multi-million-dollar deal structured for a significant payout to the brothers. And Kroc's vision was huge initially, just the U.S., but far grander than the brothers.
And the menu kept evolving under Kroc too, right? It wasn't just hamburgers?
No way. Key items like the Filet-O-Fish, the Big Mac, the Egg McMuffin, those all came later, often sparked by franchisees meeting local demand.
Franchise innovation again.
Yeah. And he set up Hamburger University for standardized training, introduced that mansard roof design later on, constantly refining the system.
So when we pull all this together, it's just not a simple story, is it? How do we think about the ethics of it all?
It's tough. The ethical questions around how Kroc treated the brothers, especially after the sale, are definitely still there. The competing restaurant, downplaying their founder status, that feels ethically questionable, even if the financial deal itself was more complex than the movie showed. But then you also see, later in life, he did start a foundation for charity. And his widow, Joan Kroc, became this massive philanthropist after he died, giving away billions.
So his legacy is complicated.
Extremely. Visionary empire builder, ruthless operator, maybe both. The truth seems to lie somewhere in that complex mix of ambition, strategy, timing, and some ethical gray areas or outright compromises.
Okay, so just to wrap up, our deep dive definitely shows the founder, while maybe a good movie, took a lot of shortcuts with the real story of the McDonald's takeover.
Especially on the money side and the motivations of everyone involved. Kroc, the brothers, it was much more nuanced.
Not a simple good guys versus bad guy narrative.
Not at all. Both sides had ambitions, strengths, weaknesses, and operated based on what they knew and wanted at the time.
All right, so here's something for you, the listener, to chew on. Considering everything we've unpacked, this more complex reality of the McDonald's story, what does it tell us about ambition itself, about business ethics, and maybe about the stories we like to tell about success?
Yeah, why is that simpler, more dramatic narrative sometimes more appealing than the messy, factual details? Is it just easier to digest, or does it say something else?
Definitely something to think about. We'd encourage you to keep digging into Kroc's life, the history of McDonald's, if this sparked your interest. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.